You know Cavalry's interface, you know how to navigate, but how do you actually create something? In Cavalry, it all comes down to one core idea: connections. The workflow in Cavalry is centered around connections, layers talking to each other. These layers can be categorized into 4 building blocks: shapes, behaviors, utilities, and effects. The first building block is shapes. This category is quite self-explanatory, but features a lot beyond the basic rectangle or text shape. It also includes layers like convex hull, forge dynamics, and duplicators. The last one being so important that it'll get an episode of its own later in the series. Cavalry's documentation, which I highly recommend for learning, explains shapes as polygonal objects that can be drawn in the viewport. Every shape has a transform and so can be animated. As you might have noticed, this category does, however, not only feature these polygonal objects, but also anything related to it. Furthermore, Cavalry states that a shape can also be affected by a behavior, which brings us to the next building block: behaviors. Behaviors are not layers that by themselves do anything but work together with shapes. That's why this is the perfect time to explain how you actually connect layers together. If you have spent some time in Cavalry, you will notice these blue dots or nodes next to virtually any layer or attribute. If you click and drag on one of these, you'll be able to drop them onto other layers or attributes to establish a connection. This allows us to not only drive multiple values based on a single value, but also allows for adding behaviors to an attribute. Sounds simple, but behaviors are such an important feature and is used in practically any scene in Cavalry. Before we look at this in practice in the upcoming behaviors episode, what you need to know is that behaviors can be connected to a shape, for example, to change its look via deformers or animate its position, scale, or whatever. This is a way of animating without keyframes and different from the manual keyframing we'll look at in the shapes episode. If you're enjoying the video so far, like and subscribe. Next we have utilities. The documentation describes it as building blocks providing fundamental functionality that can be used to create custom recipes. This building block is more advanced, but there are a few beginner-friendly ones that we'll look at in the utilities episode. For example, fall off, which you might have seen in animations before. What's important to know here is that this building block is packed with countless opportunities once your skill improves, and is really a part of what makes Cavalry cool. Finally, before moving on to Cavalry's 2 animation approaches, let's take a look at the effects building block. Now, if you think of shapes to be sort of what's in the scene, and behaviors and utilities as what determines how the shape is formed and how it moves, effects is about its appearance and includes both filters and shaders. Things you might use in this beginner's guide would be drop shadow or gradient shader. Now that layers and connections are covered, let's take a look at how you should animate. There are 2 main approaches to animating in Cavalry: manual keyframing and procedural animation. The first one uses keyframes on specific attributes to create a transition between 2 states. The procedural animation does not require keyframing, but relies on mathematical calculations in a behavior. Sounds complex, but it is really as intuitive as manual keyframing. While both are useful on their own, using them together is even more powerful. So, in the next 2 episodes, we will create both a keyframed animation and a procedural animation, so you're ready to start using both in your own projects.